Hello and welcome to Unit 3, where we're talking about generating insights about the future. So obviously, as you're aware, strategy is about making decisions in the present that will have outcomes in the future. So we're coming up with a plausible future for the organisation. For that to happen, we need to think about what are the likely scenarios, what is the likely situation that we're going to face in the future. And in order for that thinking to be constructive, we need to understand what are the critical strategic environments. So we typically talk about an organisation at three levels: the organisation itself, its microenvironment, and the term we often use to describe that is its industry. So an organisation sits within a microenvironment or industry, but that industry sits within a macro environment, which we might refer to as the nation state or the economy, even the regional economy. And for global organisations, we might even describe it as the world economy. Or if it's not a commercial organisation, the world political scenario or the world's social scenario, depending on what your organisation's strategic intent and aspiration is. So we need to understand what are the critical elements of that strategic environment. We need to understand the tools that we use to understand. In this particular unit, we're going to focus not on the organisation, which we'll discuss in Unit 4, but the microenvironment and the macro environment. And we use various tools. For example, we'll discuss and spend some time understanding PESTEL analysis, which stands for political, economic, social, cultural, technological, legal and ecological. So the 6 forces of the macro environment that we typically need to understand using PESTEL analysis. And then we'll look at the industry and the forces of the industry environment using a technique developed by Michael Porter called the environmental analysis tool, or 5 forces tool, in which we talk about the nature of competition and the extent and nature of competition between existing competitors, the threat of new entrants, the threat of substitutes, the power of buyers and the power of suppliers. So we will look at those 5 forces and the interactions of those forces and the balance of those forces and say, once we've considered the macro environment and the micro environment, what opportunities do we see for the organisation from the forces that are out there? What are the threats that we see from the forces in the industry or the macro environment? And how do they create or enable strategic decisions and strategic choices that the organisation and its strategic managers must take, not only now, but in the future? And at the end of this unit, we're going to consider a particular technique called scenario planning. We're thinking about those various forces. We try and understand what's a likely scenario for the future in the macro environment and the micro environment. What's an opportunistic view of the future in the macro and micro environment? What's a pessimistic view of the future? And what's a divergent view if the industry was transformed or disrupted? So those are the things we're going to talk about in Unit 3.